All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we are unpacking the incredibly complex and frankly fascinating history of Tamil Nadu. We're going to untangle the realities of migration, economics, and identity. We'll be looking really closely at how history, power, and money all intersect, and how we can separate totally legitimate concerns about exploitation from harmful narratives about group identity.
To get to the bottom of all this, we'll be moving through 5 key areas. We're going to start by busting the myth of perfect isolation, then look at the real story behind the temples, the true impact of colonialism and social divides, how money and power lead to exploitation, and finally, why we need to focus on justice over collective blame.
Before we get into the historical weeds, I want you to keep this ethical foundation in mind. It basically says that just because you have the power or the money to control someone absolutely doesn't mean you have the right to. Our knowledge and capability should increase our responsibility to one another, not our domination over them. It's a standard of justice that really anchors our entire conversation today.
Okay, part 1. The myth of perfect isolation. There's this really common misconception floating around that before any outside intervention, early Tamil society had absolutely zero social divisions and lived in complete, perfect isolation. But actually, if we look at ancient Tamil literature and archaeology, the facts tell a very different story. They show clear early social differences, distinct occupational groups, and hierarchies long before Europeans ever arrived. Trade, warfare, administration, and family connections across South India. That was literally the historical norm, not some coordinated plot against Tamil people.
Which leads us right into part 2, the truth about the temples.
Take a look at the majestic Tiruvannamalaya temple complex. This place didn't just appear overnight. It's like a massive historical puzzle. It starts with ancient sacred traditions and early Tamil inscriptions. Then, it gets this huge wave of major foundational development during the medieval Chola era, which is later followed by massive patronage and additions from Vijayanagara and Nayaka rulers. It's a multi-layered masterpiece, meaning you can't just point to a later inscription and claim the entire thing was a Telugu institution, and you also can't just erase that later patronage from the history books.
So the crucial point here is that finding a later inscription doesn't magically erase an ancient foundation, right? We have to ask the specifics, who built which part, and during which period. Tirupati and Srikalahasti are perfect examples of this exact same dynamic. They beautifully blend Tamil Vaishnavism and Alvar devotional traditions with major Telugu, Kannada, and Sanskrit layers. Projecting our strict modern political borders backward into medieval history, it just doesn't work.
Moving forward in the timeline, we hit part 3, colonialism and social divides. We really need to look at this era objectively. There's a myth out there that European colonialism was some grand, unified, coordinated conspiracy by multiple countries to eliminate Tamil people. In reality, it was ruthless competition. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, the British, they were fiercely fighting each other for commercial gains and expanding their own empires. It was all about aggressive commercial expansion, not a singular ethnic conspiracy.
And here's a really crucial distinction we have to make. You cannot equate individual religious identities with the actions of colonial empires. Christianity is not identical to Portuguese colonialism, and Islam is not identical to foreign political domination. Muslim trading communities and early Christian traditions were present in South India way before European political rulers showed up. So ordinary people today absolutely shouldn't be blamed for the actions of historical empires.
Now, did social divisions and inequalities exist before the Europeans arrived? Absolutely. But colonial rule took those fluid identities and literally cemented them into place. Colonial governments introduced hyper-formal bureaucratic classifications. They completely rewrote land administration, taxation, and labor systems, and maybe most impactfully, through these rigid censuses, they forced previously fluid social groups into strict, permanent boxes.
And that historical baggage sets the stage perfectly for part 4, money, power, and exploitation.
This is where we get into the very real modern anxieties people have today. Because the actual engine of exploitation, it's not about what language you speak. It's about how capital gets weaponized. Initial wealth buys economic power and market dominance. That dominance buys institutional power, which morphs into political influence and ultimately results in absolute control over people's everyday opportunities. Money is fine as an instrument for exchange, but when it's used for disproportionate control, that's when ordinary business turns into outright exploitation.
Let's look at multinational corporations objectively for a second. Foreign investment isn't automatically some evil force, right? The benefits are very real. MNCs bring jobs, capital, tech, and global market access. They build out infrastructure, but the risks are massive. If local companies are crushed because they can't compete, if profits are entirely extracted out of the region while the environmental costs are just dumped locally, and if wages are kept artificially low, that is a huge, huge problem.
So instead of getting caught up in whether a company is foreign or not, we should be asking the real questions to protect human dignity. How much actual economic value is being created here? How much is actually staying here? Who is getting that money? And most importantly, what rights do the workers have? Are they being treated fairly? That's the true framework for accountability. This brings us to our final segment, Part 5, Justice over Collective Blame.
If we want to fix these economic vulnerabilities without falling into the trap of xenophobia, we need a proactive game plan. Imagine this empowered pipeline. It starts with top-tier local education and research, which naturally leads to local invention. That secures the IP, the intellectual property, which builds globally competitive companies, meaning the wealth from global markets flows right back here as reinvestment. By building this kind of system, you aren't just manufacturing someone else's designs, you actually own the innovation.
When a society has that kind of immense technological and institutional strength, think dominating in advanced fields like semiconductors, aerospace, and biotech, you can confidently welcome international investment and migration on your own terms. But, and this is key, you have to pair that economic leverage with fair wages, rock-solid worker protections, transparent government, and deep cultural confidence.
We really have to draw a hard line here and demand strict evidence, distinguishing carefully between ordinary migration and corporate interference. An engineer moving for a job, that's ordinary employment. A massive corporation illegally manipulating local institutions for financial gain, that's interference. If a company suppresses wages or violates rights, we regulate and penalize that specific conduct. We absolutely do not blame an entire linguistic or religious community for the actions of a few bad actors. Ultimately, it all comes back to this core idea. The ability to control something does not give you the moral right to control it. People are not disposable tools meant to serve someone else's profit margin or power trip. Our scientific knowledge and economic progress should be used to protect each other, not dominate each other.
So, I'm going to leave you with this to chew on. Are we going to spend our energy fighting over who belongs based on identity, or are we going to fight to build a transparent system that actually holds powerful institutions accountable and protects everyone's dignity? The path forward isn't isolation. It's targeting harmful conduct. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning and keep seeking the truth behind the history.